Hi everybody, it's Dylan James here from Nasdaq's office in California. We've been showcasing and continue to showcase all of our great stories and companies and folks that we know in and around the San Diego ecosystem. It's all around a theme that we're calling San Diego Week. It'll be bell ceremonies and great video content. We're going to continue that right now. So joining me is one of the latest additions, I'm very proud to say, to the Nasdaq family of companies. It's Turning Point Therapeutics under the ticker symbol TPTX. And joining me as my guest today is Dr. Athena Kontoriotis, who is President and Chief Executive Officer. Athena, welcome.
Thank you, Dylan.
Great to have you as
Thank
we're
you very
celebrating
much.
San Diego. There he is again. Anyways, just a second while I brag on the IPO. So 10.6 million shares at $18 a share. You guys raised in April $191.5 million, which is spectacular. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Thanks very much.
I know we've done a lot of celebrating. We had the IPO and we're doing this today, but we're very proud and grateful to welcome you guys to Nasdaq.
Well, thank you for having us again. The bell ceremony was an amazing experience for the founders, for our families, just very awe-inspiring, so thank you.
Great. Well, let's talk about Turning Point. Tell us about the company and what you're involved in.
Sure. So the company is almost 6 years now in the making. It'll be 6 years in October, and it was co-founded by our Chief Scientific Officer, Jean Cui, who is a brilliant chemist. Mm-hmm. She's known primarily for two very well-known lung cancer drugs that are called kinase inhibitors. And so what she's done is she's essentially started a company, but with a very bold concept of going after treatment resistance. And what that means is for a patient who may have had, let's say, prior chemotherapy or even a prior kinase inhibitor, now their therapeutic options are limited, that tumor has developed some type of a resistant mechanism, whether it's a mutation or something else. And so again, with limited therapeutic options, this is the area she wanted to tackle. And so she developed our entire pipeline. And about a year ago, as we started to get clinical data, it was very clear that more clinical development experience was needed within the organization. So I first joined as Chief Medical Officer. I had success with 4 prior kinase inhibitors that are now on the market. And so that was my initial focus, was really to bring our pipeline further to the clinic. And then very shortly thereafter, I became President and CEO, finished one round of private financing, and then ultimately led the IPO.
Are there misconceptions about cancer treatments, and I would think that Turning Point is adding to that conversation with what you're doing around kinase inhibitors?
Yeah, I mean, so the misconceptions in my mind when I look back, and I treated patients, of course, with cytotoxic chemotherapy when I was in academics, as well as even with stem cell transplant, which is also unfortunately very toxic for patients but can be curative. Kinase inhibitors are very different in the sense of that one of the myths or misconceptions is you really have to make a patient very sick in order for the therapy to be effective. And kinase inhibitors have been around for a while. One of the revolutionary drugs in my mind that was developed is a drug called Gleevec in the early 2000s. And so thinking about the progression of tyrosine kinase inhibitors, essentially what they've been able to do with oral therapies is to give patients an option that may not be as toxic as chemotherapy. And also the second misconception is oftentimes if a patient has already had a therapy, now their tumor has developed some level of resistance, it's failing the patient, that they may not have as many options. And so what we've been able to show with our pipeline, again, when we've specifically looked at treatment resistance, we have a response rate of somewhere between 40 and almost 60% of our patients in that patient population with one specific type of lung cancer that have had clinical benefit, have had responses. And so to me, the misconceptions are really twofold. The idea of having to make a patient sick in order for your drug to work, and potentially if a patient didn't do well with a first-line therapy, that a second-line therapy will not work. And we've really been able to try to push against both of those with our pipeline. And
probably particularly beneficial with small kids who are suffering.
You know, what I love about this company, and one of the reasons I was attracted to the company is, one, it's not a one-product company. We do have a full pipeline. But I'm a mom, I'm a pediatrician by training. I really do look at companies that I can hopefully not only develop drugs for adults, but also for children. So our lead asset, repotrectinib, has now shown in about 80 to 85 patients, which is predominantly adults. But we've also treated some patients through what's called a compassionate use program, which are pediatric patients. Repotrectinib will be utilized hopefully for a subpopulation of lung cancer that is positive for the ROS1 oncogene. That's our adult population. And then for the pediatric patients, something that has developed over the last few years through next-gen sequencing is something called a TRK fusion. And so these TRK fusions are detected in all different types of advanced solid tumors. It could be a sarcoma, it could be a brain tumor, unfortunately, for a child. And so that's one of the ways, at least for our lead asset, that we're looking to treat both adults and children.
So now that you're public, right, what do you foresee in the next 3 to 5 years for the company?
One thing, if I go back to the story of when I first joined as CMO last year, we were 18 employees. We're now approaching 80 to 85, and we've been very mindful in the way that we've hired this team. We have a very high percentage within the organization that I personally have worked with before, at one company, if not two, and we continually try to bring in people that we have had success with, and or sometimes we've gone through hard times with, but we built a relationship with those people. And so I absolutely anticipate 3 to 5 years from now, we're continuing to grow. Again, as I said before, we're a multi-product company, so I do continue to think that our pipeline will progress forward. We will think about other targets that we will go after as well. And obviously, we're very well funded from the recent IPO that you mentioned before, and so the current plan is to make do on all the commitments that I just made to all of our new shareholders.
So what's most exciting about that next step? What gets you fired up?
The emails that I get absolutely on a daily basis from the physicians.
Oh, I can
Physicians
only
that
imagine.
are,
Yeah.
one, excited that repotrectinib is now moving towards registration. We just initiated the registration trial. This is the trial that would hopefully bring repotrectinib to many more patients, get it approved. That's a huge part of my day, is getting those emails from physicians as to how they're going to get started up with the team. The second is the requests that I get for compassionate use. Again, that's that component of pediatric patients, adult patients. So the motivation in my mind, my role, I find, is a role that I really have made 3 commitments. I've made commitments to shareholders, I've made commitments to our employees, and I absolutely have made commitments to patients. And so to me, what motivates me the most is making do, as I said before, on all 3 of those.
And I think that's the wonderful package of all of this in healthcare and life sciences, that it's so many amazing things. Obviously taking advantage of the capital markets, but then you've got patient outcomes at the end of the day that really are just amazing.
We had a pretty small team when we launched this IPO. Essentially, we did the entire roadshow, myself and my head of communications. We had no CMO, we had no CFO, but we knew that our pipeline needed to get to patients, and we needed the capital to do it. And we believed that we could do it, the 2 of us. I had an amazing underwriter team. It's ironic in that San Diego has been highlighted a lot recently because of 3 female-led companies that have had successful IPOs. I happen to have a 3 female-led underwriting team from Goldman Sachs. And so I heavily relied on those 3 women to help me navigate my IPO, and they did a wonderful job for us.
Well, we're so grateful to have you guys part of the Nasdaq family of companies, and grateful that you took a little bit of time out of your day to kind of celebrate all things San Diego with us here. Even though we're in San Francisco, it's still great. Athena, thanks so much. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time. Please keep watching for more great content all around San Diego.